Without further ado, I am excited to welcome our first speaker, Dylan Winkler. Dylan Winkler is a scientific aide at California Fish and Wildlife. He has been involved in a lot of pollinator conservation efforts with the Bumblebee Atlas, as well as with bat conservation in the state of California. And Dylan received a bachelor's degree from the University of Texas, Austin. And today, Dylan is going to be talking about floral associations documented in the California Bumblebee Atlas. So welcome, Dylan.
Thank you, Becca. And thank you for the opportunity to give my first conference presentation. Like she said, my name's Dylan, and I'm going to talk to y'all about some of my favorite things, bumblebees, specifically the floral associations we documented, at least in the first 2 years of the California Bumblebee Atlas. I've had the privilege to work on the Atlas for 2 years, and I hope I can impart not just the importance of bumblebees as pollinators, but their intrinsic value as animals native to our ecosystems. I am not a botanist, so you'll have to also bear with me, or be with me, I guess. Oh. That was my one joke. All right. So I'll start with a quick overview of the talk. I'll begin with the importance of native bees as pollinators, and then get into why bumblebees specifically are excellent pollinators. And then I'll talk about our main project, the California Bumblebee Atlas. I'll just be calling it the Atlas. I'll talk about a few of the cool rare plants and rare bees that we've documented so far, and then I'll do a quick plug at the end to join the Atlas if you can. And I'll try to be entertaining during this post-lunch sleepy hour. So beginning with a few acknowledgements, I really want to thank all the volunteers that have participated in the project so far. We couldn't have gotten any of this data or insight without y'all's dedication and time, so this talk is dedicated to them. I also want to thank the funding supporters and the leads for the project. On the left is Leif Richardson. He is a conservation biologist with the Xerces Society. He is also the main lead for the California Bumblebee Atlas. In the middle is Hilary Sardinas. She's the pollinator coordinator over at CDFW, and she's my former boss. And then on the right is Rich Hatfield. He is a senior conservation biologist with the Xerces Society as well, and he is the main lead for all bumblebee atlases across the US. The atlas is a non-lethal survey method, but I also wanted to give a thanks to the bees specifically for their sacrifice and dedication to our knowledge thus far. Okay. All right, jumping in. Pollination. Much of the flowering plant pollination on Earth is done by animals, and the majority of that is done by invertebrates. Within invertebrates are the insects, which are monumentally diverse and important in many ways, and in the context of pollination, they're superpowered. Bees especially are rock stars, and they pollinate a huge number of plants, including many of the crops we rely on and our native wild plants. So why are bees such good pollinators? Bees have evolved from wasps to specialize in eating pollen. So in order to bring their pollen back to their babies to eat, they've evolved ways to carry pollen. Many solitary bees, like the guy in the middle, or a girl in the middle, I should say, have scopa, which are modified leg hairs with extra long bristles designed to pack pollen in. There's some really cool differences in scopa between bees that collect different sized pollen grains. You can think of cactus bees as having really, really big scopa. There are also some social bees, like the bumblebee on the right, which have corbicula instead of scopa, which is a modified bowl shape on their leg. So of all of our bees, why study bumblebees? Why not honeybees, which are much more abundant? Or why not any of the 20,000 species of bees globally? Bumblebees are a very small selection of that. There's only around 260 species. But there's a number of reasons why bumblebees make great pollinators, not just because they're cute. Bumblebees are very abundant. If you visit a blooming ceanothus in the bay or a blooming meadow in the Sierras in the summer, it's very hard to find one without a bumblebee. They're also very widespread. So bumblebees started in their evolutionary origin on the Tibetan Plateau and radiated out across the northern hemisphere. They exist above the Arctic Circle, and then they traverse the American Cordillera all the way to the tip of South America, where you can find this guy, Bombus dalbamii, the giant bumblebee. They're also very charismatic, in my opinion. They are often marked with reds, yellows, and blacks. They're quite large for an insect, and they're quite fuzzy. And all of these characteristics make them excellent pollinators in much colder environments than many of our other insects. So think about higher elevations and higher latitudes. Bumblebees are often some of the premier pollinators. And this also extends to the Pacific coastal dune system. Many of our bees have a kind of circular distribution that starts in the dunes and works around the mountain ranges. Their life cycle is also very different from many bees. The majority of bumblebees are social, which means they live in colonies with overlapping generations. The average colony usually lasts one growing cycle, so we call them annual instead of perennial like honeybees. And usually they have between 20 or 50 and 200 workers. Although there are reports of yellow-faced bumblebees from the bay having colonies over 1,000 workers. All of this means excellent pollination services to our plants. Beginning in the spring when queens emerge, they're important pollinators to our early season flowers. As the colony grows, the number of workers grow, and they switch between new plant species as new species come into bloom over the spring and summer. Finally, in the fall, the males emerge, which are accidental pollinators to a lot of our asters. Because they have such long colony life cycles, bumblebees have to use a wide variety of plants, so they're often called generalist foragers, which means they use a variety of plants for nectar and pollen. This is in contrast to specialists. You can think of something like a squash bee, which only uses squash flowers for pollen. Bumblebees, in contrast, collect pollen from many, many different plants, although they do have preferences, and I'm going to come back to their preferences in a later slide. They also can do something that honeybees can't, called buzz pollination. This is a unique form of pollination for plants with poricidal anthers, and y'all can think of your peppers and tomatoes and many in the blueberry family. Unfortunately, like many of our native insects, many bumblebee species are declining. A study from 2022 showed that a quarter of bumblebees in North America are threatened or declining. We'll circle back to some of these declining bees in a second, but I wanted to highlight Bombus occidentalis, the western bumblebee, in this map. It used to be one of the most common bees in the Bay Area, and it's had the biggest range contraction of any bumblebee in the state. It hasn't been seen in the Bay in 20 years. And there's also at least 3 other bumblebees that have been extirpated from the Bay. So what can we do about it, and what are we trying to do about this? Well, we want to learn more about bumblebees and how they're doing in order to better conserve them. And to do this, we need comprehensive and current surveys of the state. And until 2022, this didn't really exist because California is really big and there aren't very many professional entomologists. So the Xerces Society thought to turn to volunteers. They launched the California Bumblebee Atlas to address some of the declines in bumblebees. If y'all aren't familiar with the Atlas, it is a collaboration between the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to recruit and train volunteers to survey bumblebees all across the state in order to learn about their status and distribution currently and contribute data to their future conservation. It uses a very fun survey method, which is, again, non-lethal. It's a cap capture, photograph, and release. So you can go out in the field with a net, catch them, chill them in a cooler, and photograph them, and then they'll wake back up and fly away. It's a lot of fun. The Atlas has been running for 3 years, and over that time, over 1,000 volunteers have been trained, which have contributed over 18,000 bumblebee records and counting. So far, participants have documented 23 of the 25 species of bumblebees that occurred in California historically. We're still looking for the last 2. They have also been observed visiting over 340 different plant genera, both native and non-native, and I'll get back to that in a second. And as you can see from the map of surveys, there is still a bunch of holes in the state where surveys hasn't been done, but there have been a lot of local volunteers, especially in the Chico area, and I'm thinking of John Whittlesey and Jennifer Jewell especially for their contributions. So going back to species in decline, California actually has 6 bumblebee species which are designated species of greatest conservation need, these being Bombus franklini, Bombus occidentalis again, Bombus caliginosus, the fogbelt or obscure bumblebee, Bombus sucklei, the Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee, Bombus crotchii, which got a shout out yesterday, and Bombus morrisoni. And it's not just rare plants that are important to document, or it's not just rare bees that are important to document, it's rare plants too. Bumblebees visit a variety of rare plants which are important to them at their local levels. I wanted to highlight 3, one of them being the coyote ceanothus. This is a really important plant to black-tailed bumblebees, the early bumblebee, which emerge in the spring, probably are coming out now in the Bay Area, and they're very attracted to manzanitas and ceanothus. Another important plant are the spine flowers. These are great plants as nectar sources to bumblebees, especially in the summer. And then finally, a really cool observation of bumblebees using Ventura Marsh milk vetch, which has an amazing story unto itself, but I was happy to see that Bombus crotchii, one of our declining species, was using it too. Going to some of their preferences. So bumblebees use a lot of different species, but they do have ones they circle back to a lot. Lupins and thistles have come out on top every single year of the atlas. Lupins for pollen and thistles for nectar. There's a number of other species in there that are probably no surprise. Unfortunately, Vicia has become a staple in bumblebees' diet in the spring. And then circling back to Crotch's bumblebee specifically, milkweed is by far the most important plant for them, especially for the males in the late season. I wanted to give a special highlight to bird's beak. We haven't documented bird's beak in the atlas specifically because we tell volunteers to try to avoid rare plants whenever possible. But there's been a number of studies showing that bumblebees are effective pollinators of many of the bird's beak species. And it would be great to document this, as pollination studies, as y'all know, are very hard and labor intensive. And it would be great to document some of the species currently using these rare plants. So I wanted to highlight my big point, which is rare plants and bees need each other for their survival. And this insect bum is for Mike Jones. I wanted to harp on the reciprocal nature of rare plants needing bumblebees and rare bumblebees needing abundant plants. These insect-pollinated rare plants need their vectors, and more times than not, these pollination studies haven't been done or are waiting to be done. And even species that aren't rare but are endemic to a small area are important to bumblebees or local insects. And this club-hair mariposa lily is a great example of that, since it's being visited by our endemic Crotch's bumblebee. So just because something has a small range doesn't mean it's not important locally. Okay, my last plug. Please join us. If you'd like to participate and haven't already, I'm going to run through the 3 steps. First, you can adopt a grid cell anywhere in the state that you want. You'll have to watch a 2-hour training video on the what, where, and why of the protocol. Then you'll go out and survey for bumblebees at least twice, hopefully more, and you can join me if you want next year. Surveys, again, are non-lethal. You'll catch and release all your bees, and when you're done, you'll upload your data and your photos to Bumblebee Watch. The next season starts in March in SoCal and on the coast, where queens are already emerging. And I can't really share with y'all how fun it is and how rewarding it is to see a bee fly away from your hand after warming up. You'll just have to go do it yourself. So with that, thank you for listening.
Hey, Dylan, thanks so much for that presentation. Do you know where that Crotch's bumblebee on Ventura Marsh Milk Vetch photo was taken?
Well, definitely Santa Barbara. I don't know the exact location, but I could look it up for you.
I'm just curious. There's only a few spots where that species still, and they're all reintroduction sites. So
yeah, you could
curious.
look for that yourself too on Bumblebee Watch. It's a publicly accessible record.
Awesome, thanks.
Hi, sorry, I'm always thinking about fire, so I was wondering if any of these surveys have been done in post-fire areas where some wildflowers may be coming up that aren't normally seen, and if there's any cool associations you're seeing with recovery of those flowers with these bees visiting them and pollinating others.
That's a great question, one that we're very interested in. I'm sure Becca can talk about this more in her talk, but yes, bumblebees are known to like post-fire landscapes. There's some literature about them often loving the super bloom of wildflowers after fires. There's often thought of new nesting areas opening up, more bare ground, and a lot of plants that might have been covered by large shrubs or grasses being opened up again are great resources for bumblebees. LEAF is actually working on some statistics for this, and we have done some surveys in post-fire landscapes across California, so stay tuned.
Hi. If we get to join this project and we send in a bead, you send back the identification?
Yes, that's right.
That's like a big plus.
It is, yes. Thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah.
LEAF will send back the identification.
Yeah, great.
He's the expert.
And kind of a secondary thing as a lupin person, lupins really need them, and the invasive exotic honeybee often will visit things like lupins, and they're not strong enough to really do active pollination, it seems. So it's very interesting sometimes, and so the bumblebee is really doing the pollinating. So it is something that a lot of people feel that the honeybee is doing all this great stuff, and from an ecological point of view, not so much. So yay, Bombus.
Yay, Bombus. And yay, native pollinators. Thank you.